A lot of musicians don't go into the studio thinking, I'm gonna make a hit record. It takes time for a slow burner to get up the charts and cherished by musicians and fans. Then there are the albums that take literally decades for people to understand, being way ahead of its time or probably just not being released in the right year, being cherished years later. Is there such a thing as being too ahead of the curve? Written music that was released and now music that is truly cherished. I'm Jesse Prue and this is Landmark Albums that were flops when released. The beach, cars, girls, that's pretty much the motto of the Beach Boys in the 1960s. No matter where you were, probably in Antarctica, and you put on a Beach Boys song, it will feel like summer. By the mid-60s, their songwriter Brian Wilson pretty much ran out of summer songs. Can only write about the beach for so long. Not that any of them were surfers anyways, except for Brian's brother Dennis. Brian had heard the Beatles' Rubber Soul and was determined to make an album that would change the landscape of pop music. Brian recruited the studio veterans The Wrecking Crew, recording all the music with the Beach Boys adding their voices on top. And you could say that there was a bit of fighting going on. Their singer Mike Love wanted to keep to the fun, happy surf songs, yay! In May of 1966, Pet Sounds was released. It was considered a disappointment, only reaching number 10, with the Beach Boys having top 5 albums time after time after time. It would blow up in Britain with Paul McCartney once calling God Only Knows the greatest song ever written. Rolling Stone did a list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, and it was number 2. Not a bad trip to the zoo. Before the Smiths, R.E.M., the Bangles, the Replacements, there was Big Star, pioneering power pop, and later influencing the indie rock movement. Also from Tennessee, of all places. Tennessee, the birthplace of country and folk rock. The band signed with Ardent Records and Stax Records. Number 1 record was released in June of '72 and got incredible reviews, but there was a problem. Stax Records was unable to either promote or distribute the record. Even when the band got airplay that generated interest, fans were unable to buy it as Stax had problems with the people who distribute the record, making it impossible to find it in stores. Though releasing less than 10,000 original albums, it made a huge impact on musicians. One of the songs from number 1 record, In the Street, would become the theme song for That 70s Show. Big Star would release 2 more groundbreaking albums before disbanding in the late 70s. Not bad for what looks like a supermarket sign. Having been part of the group Them, Van Morrison was a struggling musician, going solo after the breakup of Them and having a hit with Brown Eyed Girl. Morrison had trouble finding gigs in New York and got into some legal troubles with his record company, Bang, almost being deported from the States. He signed with Warner Brothers, but he still had no money. He went to the studio and quickly started writing material centered around his upbringings in Ireland, an early concept album. It took 3 days in the studio, and Astral Weeks was released in 1968. Astral Weeks received very little promotion from Morrison's record label on its release, making it not an immediate success with record buyers or critics. After Astral Weeks, as Morrison became more popular in the States later on in the 70s, the album started to sell. It has been placed on numerous lists for the best album of all time and having an enduring legacy on both listeners and musicians. Not a bad trip to Ireland, I would say. Andy Warhol came into the art scene like a bat out of hell in the 1960s, also reaching his hand into music with the Velvet Underground, a bunch of musicians from New York giving music that people had never heard before, talking about the dark side of New York and also encouraging people to eat fruit. After much delay because of the cover, the album got no airplay and negative reviews. It got no public attraction aside from art lovers looking to get their hands on an Andy Warhol piece. The Velvet Underground and Nico, released in 1967, peaked at 199 on the Billboard 200. Over the first 5 years, the album would sell 300,000 copies, with the sales picking up after that. In an interview with Brian Eno in 1982, band member Lou Reed said, quote, "I think everyone who bought one of those 30,000 copies started a band. Not bad for an album that had a bruised banana." Before punk rock, there were the Stooges, giving over-the-top performances with Iggy Pop leading the chaos, exposing himself, crowd surfing, all-around crazy moves, and peanut butter? Yeah, peanut butter. They signed with Elektra Records and recorded their first album. It was produced by John Cale, yes, formerly of the Velvet Underground. So you knew what you were going to be getting, something very different. When released in 1969, they got something different. The hippie culture had taken over. Peace and love. The Stooges represent in-your-face, loud music, and also anarchy. Understandably, the album was a commercial failure, peaking at 106 on the Billboard 200. As the years went by, the album would gain more attention, as well as their other classic, Raw Power. It would influence the late 1970s punk movement of England and New York, influencing bands like the Sex Pistols, The Clash, and also the Ramones. Not bad for a bunch of angry hippies. And talking about the Ramones, punk's first family band, or family, you could say. The band that spearheaded the New York punk scene in the late 1970s. Known for coconut haircuts, the 1, 2, 3, 4.
Take it to the 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
As well as the occasional fight on stage as well. They played CBGB's a couple years and were signed by Seymour Stein of Sire Records. The Ramones began recording in 1976, needing only 7 days and $6,400, which is close to $21,000 today, to record the album, and the record company paying $125, which in today's money is close to $500. One of the most iconic covers in rock costs $500. It was comprised of 14 songs, the longest being 2.5 minutes long, going one into the other. The Ramones only reached number 111 on the Billboard album charts. 2 singles were issued from the album, one including the legendary Blitzkrieg Bop. In the first year, it only sold 6,000 copies in the United States. Now the album is now certified gold. Did you like the video? Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you leave some video ideas down below.